Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joey Ito, Director of the MIT Media Lab. And on behalf of MIT, I'd like to welcome His Holiness the Dalai Lama back to MIT. As many of As all of you know, the Dalai Lama and MIT have established the Center for Ethics and Transformative Values, led by the Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi. And it's dedicated to the inquiry, dialogue, and education of the ethical and human dimensions of life. And as we also know, the Dalai Lama has always been very open-minded and collaborative with scientists and business leaders around the world. But I think it's a very interesting moment because as we see advances in scientific understanding of the mind and the body, this relationship is increasing and coming much closer, and the surface area, I think, has a potential to increase and create a tremendous impact. And so I think it's a very important moment for us. Also, as the world is going through this tumultuous journey right now, the role of ethics and compassion is playing a pivotal role in the value-based leadership that we need to survive this rather difficult period. And so as the work of the center continues to connect the values of His Holiness to scientists and business leaders through relationships across campus and the world, I think we're having an increasing impact on the world. My lab, the Media Lab, we have an academic program called Media Arts and Sciences. And in the arts, led by Todd Mackover, we have a collaboration with the center called Vocal Vibrations, which is using music and arts to try to deepen our understanding, collaborating with the center. I'm teaching a class together with Tenzin called The Principles of Awareness, where we're thinking about mindfulness and learning about meditation. And it's this really wonderful feeling seeing these inquisitive scientific minds of MIT grapple with the notion of mindfulness as we practice meditation every day. And it's this very wonderful thing. And at the Media Lab, we have now this year implemented a rule in our thesis that every single thesis has to have some contribution to wellness. And so as we see science sort of approaching wellness, suddenly I think the interest on what the Dalai Lama Center has to offer is increasing across campus. So I think this is a historical moment where the scientific method of Buddhist philosophy and scientific direction and the state of scientific inquiry are coming together in this kind of Cambrian moment and sort of an explosion of discovery that will happen. So we're extremely excited to have His Holiness here now and very much look forward to the discussion and continuing the work with His Holiness Tenzin and the Center. Thank you very much.
I would request Professor Stephen Hall, Chair of Faculty, to present one of the few things that His Holiness cherishes while he's on stage. Good afternoon. Welcome to Change Makers for a Better World at MIT. Your Holiness, it is a tremendous honor, delight, joy, privilege to have you back here. I also welcome all of you, our virtual guests who are watching the live webcast, and about 700 high school leaders who are on simulcast just in the next auditorium from us. Your Holiness, during your visit in 2012, we discussed several topics ranging from secular ethics to systems thinking. Our last global systems meeting touched on issues and challenges ranging from healthcare, economic meltdown, climate change, to food security. The center continues to have global engagements with its various programs around ethics and leadership. Could I have the Columbia slides, please? Our most recent engagement took place a couple of months ago with the leaders of the Arahuaco community in Colombia in South America, a community of over 150,000 people who have lived in the mountains of Sierra Nevada for several centuries and whose habitat is now endangered by the effects of climate change, mining, and other challenges. I would like to take this opportunity to remind us all of the interconnected world we live in and the impact that our thoughts and actions have. The leaders of the Arhuaco sent their greetings and concerns in the form of these simple threads tied in a knot to remind us all of the deeper relationship we share. Your Holiness, I bring this to you on their behalf to start the deliberations of this meeting. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you Professor Deborah Ancona, Faculty Director of MIT Leadership Center and Distinguished Professor in Management at MIT Sloan.
Thank you, Tenzin. Good afternoon, Your Holiness, panelists, members of the MIT community, and visitors from around the world. Welcome to the first part of our program, Global Systems 3.0, Equitable Solutions for a Changing World. The focus of this first part of the panel will be on a topic that continually gains importance, prevalence, and a need for action: climate change. 2 years ago, we met on this very stage, in this very venue, to discuss the problems associated with climate change: food security, water safety, changes in the ocean's ecosystem, health risks, and many kinds of pollution, including the spiritual kind. Unfortunately, the demons of denial and monsters of inaction continue to haunt us. Yes, the science is indisputable. The planet is still heating up. Glaciers and sea ice are melting. If allowed to continue, the results will be catastrophic, resulting in mass migrations, political instability, and a change to the very reshaping of the planet. In short, there is every reason to be scared. Yet in today's session, we want to focus on what is possible now. We are at a crossroads, and we have a choice: to do nothing and reap the consequences, or to reach out to mobilize others and improve our lot. To live in fear, or to move with hope. Today, we explore the choice of hope. We have economic and technological solutions available to us. We can do something. We can make a difference. The problem is that we don't. The problem is one of inaction. This forum, here on this stage, we carry the message that it is everyone's individual responsibility and moral obligation to engage in collective action to stem climate change. It is not enough to act individually, to learn about the problem, to talk about the problem, to change our light bulbs, yes, even to give up our cars. Individual action is important, it is critical, but it is not sufficient. We need to organize collectively to engage and generate systemic change. We must engage in what we at the MIT Leadership Center call distributed leadership, the idea that each and every individual needs to act as a leader, working in an aligned way to shift entrenched interests. Our governments are not doing it, and up to this moment in time, we are not doing enough. It is time to step into this void. Let us start this vision of hope as we watch the recent rally in New York, where hundreds of thousands of people gathered to demand action. We could roll the movie.
The People's Climate March will take place 2 days before President Obama and world leaders attend a climate summit at the UN.
Climate change will bring more extreme weather, and action is now more urgent than ever. Millions of people around the world gather in the largest climate action march in history.
The biggest gathering seeking to address climate change ever.
2,000 rallies in 162 countries, from Paris, Melbourne, Australia, Rio de Janeiro.
Activists are filling the streets to demand action on climate change.
We are here because we are redefining this moment, this movement, this time. I want to thank all of the marchers today for coming together and taking a stand. We need you.
You all saw a massive people's march. I hope the leaders of the world listened.
We're the first generation to feel the impacts of climate change and the last that can do anything about it.
Time is running out.
Don't give up the fight. Our citizens keep marching. We cannot pretend we do not hear them. We have to answer the call.
And with that, Your Holiness, let me introduce our panelists, who will each speak for 5 minutes apiece. John Sturman, a professor at the MIT Sloan School of Management, who will discuss why these people are marching. He will talk about the threat to our future, the challenge that we face. But then we want to quickly move on to the story of hope, where Rebecca Henderson from the Harvard Business School will talk about the fact that there are economic and technological possibilities. And then on to Professor Marshall Ganz from the Kennedy School, who will demonstrate what we can do, the power of collective action. And after that, we'll ask Your Holiness to engage the panel in conversation around the question of what can we do, bringing his spirit of hope and possibility to the rest of us. And with that, John, please get us started.
Thank you very much, Deborah, and Your Holiness, it's really a privilege to be here with you again and continue the conversation. So you just saw 400,000+ people marching in New York demanding action on climate change. And some are asking, why did they gather there? I think the more interesting question is, why aren't we all gathered there? Why aren't there more people gathered there? And how do we communicate such a complex topic as climate change in a way that remains grounded in the science and yet motivates action? So it's fallen to me in 4.5 minutes now to present the science. Good luck. So the deniers and the vested interests would have you believe that climate change is not happening or it's not certain, and in any case, it's going to be far away in the distant future, so we don't have to worry about it. That's just plain wrong. It's happening now already. We have events like Superstorm Sandy with 200 people nearly killed, 65 billion in damage, the drought in the United States clearly associated with climate change, the heat waves and fires in Russia and in Greece and in Australia, billions of dollars, tens of thousands of people dying from these events, Hurricane Katrina, Typhoon Haiyan, and we can go on and on. Here's a statistic that I think ought to scare you. The World Health Organization says 7 million deaths per year are caused from air pollution. That's 1/8 of all the deaths every year on the planet. And the vast majority of that pollution is coming from the combustion of fossil fuels. So it's already happening now. We've already warmed the planet more than 0.8 degrees C. Can we bring that screen back, please? Thank you. And so what I want to do with you now, rather than tell you more about the science, is let's stabilize the climate together. So what we have here is a simulation model that I and my colleagues at Climate Interactive, go to climateinteractive.org, and you can get this model and try it yourself. We've developed this simulation model based on the best available science, and what we're going to do now together is see if we can create a safer climate for our kids and our grandkids. Now, the graph here shows emissions from the year 2000 to the year 2100. This is carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere from the burning of fossil fuels. Now, the first thing I know some of you are thinking is, 2,100? Are you kidding me? I don't even know what I'm doing after lunch. The students out there and the youth in the other auditorium, you're thinking, I've got midterms, I've got, parties to go to, I've got to get a job and get into college. 2,100? This is not far away. So, if you're a high school student today, as our youth audience is, you might have children if you choose to do so, I don't know, sometime in the next 10 years perhaps. Your life expectancy, if you were born around the year 2000, is about 80 years if you're privileged to live in an affluent country. So you're likely to live to the year 2080, and your children who might be born in the year 2025 are going to live well beyond the year 2100, and your grandchildren well beyond that. This is not theory at all. So let's stabilize the climate. This is business as usual. This is where we're headed if there isn't a dramatic change, a tripling in emissions. And the projection is that that will cause the global average temperature to rise by nearly 9 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees C, but I'm going to do Fahrenheit today. 9 degrees Fahrenheit by the year 2100. The green line there, that is the goal that all the countries of the world have agreed we must not exceed. Now, that green line doesn't mean that it's safe. It's just much safer. Climate change is going to cause more harm than it already has, even at that level of 2 degrees C or 3.6 Fahrenheit. But we're going to blast through that level by around 2040 and head up towards 9 degrees. Now, you may not think 9 degrees Fahrenheit is a big deal, but let me tell you, during the height of the last ice age, right here where we are gathered today, right here, there was a glacier a mile high. Sea level was almost 400 feet lower. And the global average temperature at that time was only 9 degrees colder than it is today. So let's stabilize that climate. What we can do is we can stop the growth of emissions. And as I move this slider, we stop the growth of emissions in the year that's indicated. And as I do that, you'll see the temperature begin to change. So, let me hide that for a second. In what year do you all think? Let's ask the audience, Your Holiness. In what year do you all think we ought to stop the growth of emissions? We'll fill the gap with renewables and efficiency. We won't be hurting our economic prospects, but we're not going to be using fossil fuels to do it. So in what year do you all think? Is 2052 good enough? More? Earlier? How about 2036? Earlier? How about 2018? That's just a couple of years from now. How's that sound to you? Okay, do you think that's going to do it? We going to hit that target? No. Take a look at that. We blast right through the target. Just a few years later, we've created a safer world, but it's nearly 6 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than it is today. That's going to cause potentially devastating impacts. So, what do we have to do? We're going to have to cut emissions. We're going to have to cut them dramatically, starting pretty much right away. We're going to have to cut deforestation. We're going to have to restore our forests. And if we do that, and there's no time to waste, we can hit that target. But there's no time to waste. The current system is not taking us on that path. It's taking us to a path of destruction. The question then is, when everybody understands the challenge, how do we overcome the fear? Because what I always hear now is, okay, that's what would be needed, but it'll kill the economy to do so. It'll hurt jobs. It'll destroy our competitiveness. That's not true either. And now my good friend and my colleague, Rebecca Henderson, is going to tell you why.
So my job is to tell you that this is not a technological problem. This is not an economic problem. This is a social and political problem, and I have 4.5 minutes to explain why. So first, it's not a technical problem. We have the technologies to dramatically reduce energy demand by increasing the efficiency with which we use energy. To give you a sense of the order of magnitude, The UK and Japan use about half as much energy per unit of output as America and Canada. The projections suggest that if India were to adopt leading-edge energy efficiency technologies, they could use 40% less energy by 2030. Simply using energy more efficiently is a well-established pathway to changing our future. And it is effectively free, or rather, it pays you back right away. A recent study by that well-known out-there organization, the Department of Defense, established that to build buildings in such a way that they're LEED silver, that means properly insulated, the energy systems are working well, that adds about 1% to the cost of the building, and you can expect to see reductions in energy use of 5 to 30%, or a payback within 3 to 5 years. My best leading indicator are the real estate developers who come to the Harvard Business School for programs, also well-known out there lefties. They are routinely considering energy efficiency, demand reduction as they build new buildings. It's just good business. So the first pathway to do this is getting much more efficient in the way we use energy. The second path, of course, is reducing fossil fuel usage, moving away from coal and oil and gas. We need to move to hydro, to nuclear, to wind, to solar, to geothermal. And there's really good news there, too. Costs have been dropping like a stone. The cost of wind has fallen by over 2/3 in the last 25 years. Solar has dropped by 50% in the last 5 years. Next generation nuclear power, a bunch of it being developed right here at MIT. The projections suggest that it will cost 60% less than current nuclear, while simultaneously burning up the waste from old nuclear power and not generating any new waste and being much safer. Looking forward, it looks as though wind will be cost competitive with coal within the next 10 years, solar within the next 15. And I was a professor of technical change here at MIT for 20 years. I think if we decided to do this, costs would come down much faster and the technology would improve much faster than we think. So even just as a conventional, pointy-headed economist and technologist, we can do this transition. And of course, I haven't been talking about the costs of not doing this, because burning coal is not free. John told us that we have millions of deaths every year just from the cost of air pollution. Burning oil and coal and gas is imposing huge costs on our children. An estimate from the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences suggested if we do nothing, by 2095, the cost to the economy will be about $12 trillion a year. That'll be roughly 10% of world GDP. And that doesn't take account of the misery and the death and the habitat destruction. Current estimates suggest it will cost maybe 1% of GDP to fix this problem, probably less. The most recent estimate says $270 billion, that's a quarter of 1%. And the costs of not doing anything are 3 or 4%. So this is eminently technical possible. It's not going to destroy the economy, rather the reverse. This is an economically smart decision. It's not economics, it's not technology. It's about people, it's about communities. And to talk about that, I'm going to hand over to my friend and colleague, Marshall Ganz.
Thanks, Rebecca. Your Holiness, panelists, my mustache is never going to be the same again. Thank you for that. In my work with social movements, civic associations, and community groups, I've learned that leadership really matters, but it's leadership of a particular kind. For me, it's leadership rooted in 3 questions posed by a first-century Jerusalem scholar, Rabbi Hillel, who, when asked, "How do I act in the world?" responded with 3 questions. "Ask yourself," he said, "if I am not for myself, who will be for me?" That's not a selfish question, it is a self-regarding question, taking seriously one's own values, one's own resources, one's own choices. But the second question he says to ask yourself is, if I am for myself alone, what am I? Because to be a who and not a what is to recognize we exist in relationship with others in the world. And the third question he says to ask yourself is, if not now, when? The solutions to the problems we try to solve don't precede action, they flow from action. And getting into action without knowing the full solutions, but faith that you will discover them, requires hope, it requires courage. And so this kind of leadership is leadership of the hands, it requires skills, leadership of the head, it's strategic, and most of all, it's leadership of the heart, because it requires courage, and it requires hope, and it requires solidarity. Now, leadership in the service of deep change, what we might call structural change, the kind of political, economic, and cultural change required to deal with global warming, is a power challenge. In other words, it's not a knowledge problem. We know what to do. It's a problem. It's a power problem. We've been unable to turn that knowledge into action. What do I mean by power? My goal may be to reduce carbon emissions, but it may require decisions by someone else, like an energy company, and their decision to shift from coal to green energy. But unless the energy company's goals, making a profit, for example, depend on some way on my decisions, why will they shift? I need them more than they need me. So how can I turn the tables? By myself, not very easily. But if I can persuade my neighbors to join me in switching to a different power company, it may turn out the power company needs our collective resources as customers more than we need theirs as suppliers, and things begin to shift. And if that works, we get not only one power company to change its practice, we've organized our community to act as one in achieving common goals. And that's how social movements, civic associations, and advocacy groups can turn resources they have, people, into the power they need, economic, political, and yes, moral influence, and in this instance, affecting corporate policy. Now, climate change, dealing with climate change, requires mobilizing power on a scale far greater than what it takes to change the practice of a single company. Fossil fuel companies who make money from creating the very problem we're trying to solve. Politicians influenced by contributions by those fossil fuel companies, and even universities who benefit from investing in these same companies are all involved. But social movements are not only about economic and political power. They're not only about economic and political reform. They're about moral power and moral reform. They're about not only negotiating goods, they're about what is good. They're about the meaning we hold as individuals, as communities, and as institutions. And that's really where they get the power. That's where they can get their power. Changing the status quo always requires recognizing that those who resist change will have more resources. But social movements need to be more resourceful, make up for resources, conventional resources they don't have, with commitment, courage, time, and the willingness to take risks, in what they do. They're also about urgency, moral urgency, especially when the challenge they are trying to deal with isn't understood by the general public as urgent. But when a black woman named Rosa Parks refused to sit in a segregated bus, it created moral urgency. When students sat in seats reserved for whites only at lunch counters in this country, it created moral urgency. And that's where we come in. We have choices to make about whom to buy from, whom to vote for, with whom to cooperate, even which laws to observe. And the history of social movements, from civil rights, the women's movement, the environmental movement, the early environmental movement, all demonstrate that when we mobilize people to use their resources together, it can make a big difference. Mothers Out Front here in Massachusetts is organizing moms to do exactly that, switch their energy company from one power source to another. 350.org organized people across America to raise the cost of the Keystone Pipeline. Greenpeace has organized people around the world for global action. The Greens movement in Germany has made major shifts in public policy. And here in the US, as we saw, 400,000 people showed up in New York City to recommit to this cause. There will be conflict, there will be struggle, but there can be change. But we can only succeed if we act together. Thank you.
Now I would like to ask Your Holiness if you could react to what you've just heard. We've heard about the challenge from John, about what's going on. We've heard from Rebecca about the fact that there are technological and economic solutions that will not bankrupt us. We've heard from Marshall about the call to action, to create or join existing social movements. You travel around the world, you talk to people all the time. We'd like to know your response to what we've just said. If you could share with us some of the hopeful things that you have seen and some of your thoughts on how to move forward.
Firstly, I want to thank these sort of ecology or global warming sort of specialists. You really make presentation because of very precise. And the statistics, I mean.
Statistics.
My talk usually about inner value, statistics share your money.
I have no statistics to show.
Then one thing very obvious, the ecology problem, the global warming, these are so important. This is not a question of one or two nations or one or two continents. This is a question of whole 7 billion human beings' future. They are concerned. So problem, I think the concerned people, short-sighted, and look their own
interest,
immediate sort of interest. Even they may have some sort of the awareness.
Awareness.
The long-term consequences. But then still, as someone mentioned,
pointed out,
it doesn't matter. This is something in future.
Far away.
I'm concerned now, mainly dollar. So here, my view is, I always telling people, the sense of concern of 7 billion human beings on the basis of sort of concept or sense of oneness of 7 billion human beings and social animal. Long term, my own interest related with rest of the world. So humanity happy, world generally, including ecology, happy, then I got maximum benefit. If world face some problem, no person can escape. So I'm simply one, I said, a student of Buddhist thought, and we emphasize altruism. And altruism with action-oriented, oriented.
Altruism that must be translated into action.
So the motivation is, I feel, the most important. The proper motivation develop awareness, very important. So, these people, experts of clear presentation, really immense help to understand the reality and also understand consequences. Then you see develop desire, oh, I must do something as a part of humanity. So firstly, I think these kinds of meeting more often and make sort of public known these sort of say reality. Then at practical level, I think like the demonstrations, certain sort of because of mindube,
so like the New York demonstration, it's very important to show a public's sense of dissatisfaction with the existing situation.
That's necessary. I think two things. One, I think many cases, out of ignorance, they simply carry their harmful activities. So for them, these activities makes awareness. And second, sometimes people knows these things, as I think you mentioned, knows these things, but unless something heard,
touches them directly.
Oh, not much sort of concern. So some people's some kind of
expression, strong expression.
Boycott,
for example, that may take the form of a more active form, like boycotting products of a particular corporation that has bad environmental records.
Yes. Then you see these people who knows, but
doesn't care.
No immediate sort of effect on them, so they doesn't care. So it's a little bit non-violent way.
Of course, non-violent.
Then that's I think necessary. One time in Delhi, we talk, the less privileged people, including the homeless people. Then I expressed, now maybe time come, some kind of mass or also the demonstrations or like that, and then make known the concerned people. Now this is something serious matter. So if you decide organize such things, then I will join. Demonstrate, shouting. I told them, really, this not selfish reason, but well-being of humanity. And as you mentioned, the human nature. You see, parent, and then there are children, grandchildren, grandchildren. So the present parent, should take some moral responsibility. That concern, I have no children, so no concern.
You're concerned for all children. Yes. Not particular children.
So therefore, I think these things are not only the practical sort of
issue,
beneficial.
Right. Practically beneficial.
But morally, I think really, serious question about moral responsibility, moral or sense of concern of well-being of rest of humanity and coming generations. The human population, according to some sort of expert, so their sort of prediction, they say today about 7 billion. Next, after a few decades, end of this century, human population will reach 10 billions. I think it may be possible. When I first came to India, then we used to say 6 billion. Now, after 50 years, now we say 7 billion. So the medical facility improve. So lifespan
increase.
So therefore, the population itself, and then also it's a huge gap, rich to poor. It is totally immoral. Let poor people, let remain today's sort of poverty, these things. Totally wrong. We must sort of uplift their living standard. Then it's nature resources. These also, I think in early, 80s or late 70s, one occasion in England, some discussions. And I sort of private or just beside the big sort of meeting, there's a few scholars with some chat, and they say the even present population about 6 billion. The poorer section of people's living standard, then they say northern world and the southern world, huge gap. So southern world's, their living standard raised up to northern world's standard. Then nature resources already questionable whether sufficient or not. So now 7 billion. So these are very, very serious matter, and also matter of moral principle. So the most important thing is these people, you should speak out. You should tell.
Speak out loud.
Speak out. And then I think televisions or media people also, I think, should pay more serious attention. Not just advertising or picture of one beautiful girl. Okay, occasionally it gets some good. But serious matter, you say, must publish, must say. And then not only just the negative side, inform negative side, murder, scandal, all these negative things, but also you say must tell, must show positive side. We have now, for example, this ecology problem. Mention seriousness. Meantime, we can do this to prevent or at least to reduce. Then people think. Only so the negative side, then demoralize. Or maybe some take very seriously, then suicide. That's not what sort of use. So they make clear all the sort of seriousness. At the same time, we have the sort of potential or ability to overcome this, at least to reduce this sort of danger. Then give people more courage, more enthusiasm. That I think very, very important. That I feel. Otherwise, I'm not now here. I'm a student to learn from you. That's all. I have nothing to say.
So, Your Holiness, you've said that this is an enormous problem. The population is growing.
Yes.
And it is a moral responsibility to take these things on. And yes, the media needs to change. And yes, we need to create change. I'm wondering if you have some stories, and the panelists also have some stories of how regular people can step up to try to make these changes happen, to begin to now, immediately, make change.
I don't know, roughly many years ago, when Japanese economy still going that way, then I expressed, there's no guarantee the Japanese economy always go that way. So it is important right now, think more sustainable economies think. And in India also, you see, I sort of expressing, I'm not an economist. My knowledge about these things, as well as experience, these things are just a zero, nothing. But seems, you see, too many cars in big city, in rural area, quiet space, because of empty, because of the urban, open space, but much less car. Real sort of development must take place in rural area. Then economy can be more sustainable. And I think a human way of thinking, emotional thinking, also maybe, I think, better. People in big city, I think their human feeling seems to say less. In a rural area, they're working, farming, or some other things, and the neighbors really feeling of neighbor. So when they meet, say hello, good morning. In big city, big building, when we met, morning. Hello, says Mary. Don't you know?
No time to say hello, just walk on.
So I think the human feeling, sometimes you see, we human beings become like part of mission, like that. So the human friendship, these people in the big cities, the money is more important than just friendship.
You know,
so therefore, you see, I think America, I think maybe okay, but the rural area development, and because of that less gap, rich and poor, then everybody feels happy. This, I think, underdeveloped countries, I think, more serious matter these things.
I think that when you point to the significance of the human connection, that's the foundation of it all. In my experience, the pathway from thought to action flows through commitment. But it's commitment not just to an idea, it's a commitment to each other, to other people. And the power of collective action is in making those commitments to others so that we struggle together, not as isolated individuals. To me, that's foundational. And I think understanding, today there's a lot of romance with the social media, that through many clicking, we will make change. That's interesting. We can share information. But I think, as you point to, the foundation is in the connectedness between people who can then commit to one another, decide with one another, act with one another, experience the support of one another, and learn from one another how to make progress on these enormous challenges. And that's how movements work. And that's one reason we're hoping one thing people can take away from today is the significance of struggling not alone, but with others as a foundation for dealing with this enormous challenge.
Absolutely. That's right.
Marshall, before we stop, could you perhaps provide His Holiness with just an example from some of the work that you do of what that human connection looks like and what that movement is like in a concrete example?
I think His Holiness has a pretty good idea when he was talking about nonviolence, and he wanted to caution me to be sure to be nonviolent. One thing we know is that nonviolence works. And it works because it requires the cooperation of many people. A few people with guns can't do it. It takes lots of people committing to act together. And whether it's in the form of boycott efforts, as you described, efforts to get these universities to divest from fossil fuel companies. How can they operate? I mean, Universities have not just what can I say, economic, they have a moral responsibility.
That's right.
They have a moral responsibility. They're supported with public funds. They have a moral responsibility. Students happen to be here. I don't know, one day students stop going to classes, the university stops. I mean, I'm not advocating that. but it's a reminder that whether it's an energy company or a fossil fuel company or a university, these institutions depend on our cooperation. That means that we can always just say no. Not like Nancy Reagan, but more in the spirit of Gandhi, who said, we can always choose not to cooperate, and guess what? It begins to fall. My work in the civil rights movement revealed that. My work in the farm workers movement revealed that. My work with the Dreamers has revealed that. And I think the challenge before us now is to take those lessons and bring it to bear here. And as I said in my comments, there are groups right now doing all this. There's a mothers group right here in Massachusetts who's saying, look, this isn't about abstract issues, this is about our children. It's about our children's future. We're going to start by getting our neighbors to switch to green energy. That's an option here. We're going to try to get institutions in our communities to switch. We're going to try to get the state to act legislatively to switch. Those are things we can do, and there's lots of them.
Right? All right.
Yes.
We seem to be in harmonious accord here.
I guess I would call maybe on Rebecca to perhaps, so Marshall just brought up that story, to just tell us a little bit about how that organization got started by regular people.
Mothers Out Front?
Yes. And this is just an example of one. There are many. We're going to encourage you to think about them. This is just one story.
So I hope she's not in the room because I'm going to embarrass her. But a few years ago, I was sitting in the living room of a friend called Kelsey Worth, and we were talking about what could be done to change the course of history and to really make a difference. And she said, you know, all the mothers I talk to are really distressed about global warming. But they think about what's happening to the world, and they think about what's happening to their children, and they weep. And then they think, but I'm just me, I'm sitting alone in my house, what can be done? And what Kelsey did with other very committed, wide-awake people is begin this organization called Mothers Out Front, which started with 8 people in her living room and then joined up with 350.org and is now thousands of mothers across the state taking action. I'm always struck, it's these individuals. Can I tell a business story as well?
You may.
So I have a friend called Auden Schendler who works for a ski company, the Aspen Ski Company. And if you're a ski company, you're really worried about global warming because there won't be any snow. And that's a big problem. And so he was thinking, what can he do? How can he help? And he worked with everyone else in the company to dramatically reduce the amount of energy used at the ski resort, but then to join with environmental organizations to petition the Supreme Court to say that CO2 is a pollutant and should be regulated as a pollutant. And the Aspen Ski Company was the first company to sign up, and then they got other companies to sign up, and other people engaged, and the Supreme Court ruled in their favor. And it all started with one person going, we have a serious problem, what can I do? Doing individual action, but then moving out to join with other businesses, other organizations. We always think it's someone behind the curtain, but it's individuals starting this and coming together.
I have a complementary example. It's a little different, and it was in the New York Times today. In the New York Times today, there's a report about a meeting in Colorado of the fossil fuel industry with the Berman consulting firm from Washington, D.C. And in that meeting, the report goes, there's a very frank discussion of how to besmirch the reputations of those leading climate change movements. And I think the quote was, you got to play dirty to win. Now, there was one person in that meeting who said, not for me. He's the guy who recorded the meeting. He's the guy that turned it over to the Times.
Or she.
And so, or she. Thank you very much. Woo. I guess I assume fossil fuel industry, but thank you for the correction. Yeah, it could well be. Who was moved by their conscience that wasn't enough. I mean, that wasn't right. So now, pick up the Times today. You'll see the whole game plan of the fossil fuel industry for undermining the efforts that we're trying to commit to here. So this is a struggle, but it is a struggle that can be won in the ways we're describing.
So let me add one story, and I want to particularly address this to the youth audience, the folks that we saw earlier. I have a friend named Kim Wasserman Nieto. She is a Latina housewife in Chicago. She lives in the Little Village neighborhood. And she became active at the age of 21, not much older than the folks that are in the other room and not much older than many of you. And she got active because asthma was hurting the kids in their neighborhood, and that was coming from the 2 coal-fired power plants. The poor folks in our country live where the pollution is. And so she got active. She created the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization and built it over years and enrolled folks in it, and they succeeded 2 years ago in shutting down both of those coal plants. And I just want to say that you don't have to be Auden Schindler who can bring a case before the Supreme Court. You don't have to be someone of our age. You can start right now and get active and make a difference. Right?
And with that, I believe, unless His Holiness has anything else to say, we need to wind it up. But I think the point we're trying to make is that it's up to us. It's up to every individual who's sitting in this room to do something not just alone, but to galvanize other people. And there are many examples. It can be done, and it can be done now. And to end, what we'd like is for Marshall to lead us all in thinking about what each of us can do right now.
Yeah, as we were saying, that the pathway from thought to action flows through commitment. And we'd just like to invite each person to take a silent moment here and just reflect on what kind of commitment could you make to work with another. Not just your individual, but what kind of commitment can I make to another person to work together on this challenge? Just take a minute and think about it, and then I'll tell you what comes next. Just think about it for a moment. Now, turn to your neighbor and tell your neighbor about your commitment. Don't keep it as a secret. Turn to your neighbor and tell your neighbor. You can go both directions. It's okay. I know it's confusing.
Or join someone. You can be 3.
And when you've made the commitment and told your neighbor, would you please stand up? Stand up if you've made a commitment and told your neighbor about it. Please stand up. Please stand up if you told your neighbor and you've made a commitment, you've told your neighbor. Please stand. Commitments in secret are not commitments. We better stand up here, I think, as well. And give yourselves a round of applause, please. How about an organized applause? Thank you. Thank you very much. After this program concludes, outside, the students are manning the tables and womaning the tables. The students are managing the tables out there with a variety of organizations that are active. They invite your engagement, they invite your participation. But thank you again for your engagement, your participation, your support. And thank you so much to His Holiness for inspiring with his example and his words and his wisdom. Thank you very much.
When you came in, you were given a bracelet. Please tie it to the neighbor next to you. With that commitment, as a reminder.
All right, okay.
Sorry. Do you already have one of these? Oh, you tie one on me.
Sorry.
I'll help you with your computer. What can I do? Grab the cords?
Coming here.
Oh.
Please be seated. And please join me in thanking the panelists. Please be seated. Your Holiness, I gave these experts a challenge that since they are all experts in their field, they had two challenges. One, to be able to communicate to an average 12, 13, 14-year-old all over the world. And the second challenge was to be economical with words. I think it was the second part that was more challenging. It's a privilege now, Your Holiness, to include in the next panel some of the youth leaders who have engaged in community all over the world. So if I may request the speakers to actually come up. No, that's fine. So, Your Holiness, you have often encouraged good leadership and stewardship, both in previous generation and the younger generation. And we wanted to create an opportunity for the youth to have their voices heard during this Changemakers meeting. And before I introduce the panelists, let's perhaps roll the video.
The workshop that we did today and yesterday was about empathy, and the title of it was A Mile in Someone Else's Moccasins.
We actually wrote stories about the life of a shoe. I picked the high heels.
We learned about what it feels like to be someone else. You don't always have to agree with everybody, but you just have to appreciate their views and you have to think about their views.
Today we just talked about forgiveness. We had this activity where you would take a rock depending on the size of the problem or the situation.
Next, we're gonna put your stone in your backpack and you're gonna walk around. It's like holding onto a grudge. So, oh my God, right?
When we finished the activity, I said that I wasn't gonna forgive, but I think that
I think it's been a waste of my time, and I just need to let it go.
I'm forgiving my sister for hurting my leg really bad. Yes.
I think that through this program, teens build their confidence level.
Self-acceptance means accepting who I am and who I was destined to be.
Self-acceptance means knowing that I will never be perfect and being okay with that.
New opportunities and possibilities to be the very best that we can be. At least that's what you taught me.
Today we made flags to represent how we were thankful.
Thankful for a lot of things, but mostly my mom. She's a single mom. She puts food on the table every day. She's just one of a kind.
I drew a tree, a rainbow, and my family. Before the lesson, I didn't know the full definition of gratitude and the purpose of it, and I'm really thankful for learning it.
Your Holiness, this is part of our Transformative Teachers collection, which is a both learning online and in-person approach to teach kids interactively about core values, about human values. And we just launched a social media site that has a lot of young adults who have been sending thousands of questions for Your Holiness for today. And representing a sample of that youth, to our very left is Noah Mackover, a high school senior at the Cambridge School of Weston, and an avid volunteer in the community with interest in synthetic biology, music, serving on our school board. To my left is Jakara Garraway, a junior at Boston Latin Academy, and she was selected by Teen Vogue as one of 30 teen ambassadors in America. And our third and youngest panelist is a powerhouse. 10-year-old Vivian Hall has taken up the challenge of ending child slavery and raised over $100,000 through lemonade stands. So perhaps, Jakara, you can begin.
All right, cool. Hello there. So it is a great honor to be here. I mean, especially for youth such as myself. This is one of the last places I would imagine ever being, pretty much. And I speak on behalf of my panel and, of course, teens everywhere, where sometimes we feel like we would never get these type of opportunities, so we just don't look for them at all. But, I mean, they're out there. You just have to have the drive to go and get them. So I would like to start this discussion by reading my poem, if you don't mind. All right. The name of my poem is From Today Until Tomorrow. From today until tomorrow, years later to forever, I want to make an impact that will change the world. There are moments when we see the violence coming, but there is no one in sight to stop it. But I am tired of waiting for Superman. It's time to be our own hero. I want to be read in a textbook one day. I want to be that story on the front page. I want to be that inspiration for a song, that person played by an actor in a movie. I want to be legendary, but not a legend. I want to feel powerful, not powerless. I want to break barriers, but not be broken. I want to wake up and think that I am still dreaming. Right now, I am young, but I won't always be. By the time I'm grown all the way, I hope to see a different side of the world, one where the law is not treated like a tool to fix people, one where we can be satisfied with a little bit, but still feel like we have a lot, one where wealth is shared and poverty is disappearing. It takes more than just words to repair. It takes more than an army to win a war. It takes more than an education to prepare a child. And it takes more than love to show we care. To be honest, I have absolutely no idea what it takes, and I won't pretend like I do either. But from today until tomorrow, maybe even a few years later to forever, we will have that answer.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Okay. Now, Your Holiness, I would like to present you with the first question. And my question is, what is a piece of advice that you were told as a young adult that still stays with you today? And how has it benefited your life and or your overall outlook?
I think, and also is telling people, although I think age 5, I live separately from my mother. But then, next, I think 10, 15 years, I've grown up with older people, age-wise, older people. But these people really love me.
Very kind,
very kind. And when we play, they equally sort of
join.
In the ceremonial thing, I sit on throne. But when we play, equal. So whatever is my sort of meal come, I often share with these people. These people, most of them, sweeper, uneducated. They simply come from a village like that. So they're really showing basic human quality. So these people also, you see, source of information. When we talk, they brought all sorts of complaints or rumors or something. They complain, regent, and also the high officials, the high lamas. When I ask some officials, then they too much polite. So these innocent people really, I think, gives me some kind of complete relax. Whatever I ask, they're straightforward. Explain to me, and they play with me very equal. So I physically, I'm a weak, as a sort of young child. So often I defeated by them. So sometimes I cry. So this I really feel how much of the important human affection, human love. So I think, you see, nowadays I reflect those years of experience. I think I received a lot of
lessons
on affection. So that's my sort of feeling. Then, of course, my mother, very, very kind mother, illiterate, uneducated, just a religious farmer, mother, but very, very kind. Then I ask one question to you. My case, my mother, so sort of was kind to me. So she often carried me on her shoulder.
Oh.
Do you have that experience?
I don't know if I can remember.
그래서 아멘 좀 봐야. I think 3-4 years.
Yeah.
I don't remember. My mother carried me. So sometimes I think some of you I think knows my mother so kind. So I become a little bit aggressive. So sit on my mother's shoulder quite comfortably and hold my mother's 2 ears. Then when I want to go this side, that side. You have some experience, you see, sitting on mother's shoulder.
Yeah,
Mom
and
same.
Dad.
You also. Yeah. Then do you ever sort of try to control your mother sort of walking? So really, I think even animal, the real teacher of compassion or affection is our mother. So that experience really absorbed in our blood. So I think the relation, mother and children, child, I think something very, very important. So the mother, she should spend more time with the children, like that.
Thank you.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think my mom still carries me around everywhere on her shoulders, metaphorically. But so in the past panel, there was a lot of talk about global warming, which is terrifying, and whenever we look at the news, we're bombarded with images of wars, disaster, and it's can be paralyzing, but it's extremely important to remember to find beauty and find hope in the world. So can you speak about some ways that you think we can find hope today, or places that you find beauty in the world?
My age now, 79, next year 80. So more than half century of the past century, I notice I'm passing through. Now, at least it's 14 years into the 21st century. So observing events. Number one, peace and war. I think desire for peace and some kind of strong feeling about the fed up about violence much increased. Then I think also awareness about ecology, importance of ecology. When I was young, I think no idea. Then, now later part of my life, the seriousness about ecology, now very strong. Even you see some country, political party, Green Party, originally this is based on concept of ecology, important ecology. Yeah. Then, in the past, spirituality and science is something to separate the road, right? Now, later part of 20th century, they will come closer. Like I think quantum physics also used to teach us observers sort of view. Role, very important. So, matters and minds, some kind of closer connections. Then, I think last few years, I think in early part of my refugee life, my first visit to Europe, 1973. Then 79, come to America, visit America, and also Soviet Union. So during those years, I think the general public, when I give talk, some school or some college or university, you see, not much showing interest about inner values. And business circle, I think very few showing interest about inner value. Then the later part of 20th century, and now beginning of this century, now last, you see, 70 years. You see, when I talk, the inner values are something very important. When I talk, many audience really now showing some kind of agreement or something. And then many teachers, many educationists also now, they admit existing education system, the moral ethics not adequate. So therefore, you see, judging these things, world becoming better. And then one sort of story. 1996, I have the audience with Queen Mother of England, Queen. And I asked her, at that year, her own age, 96. So I asked her, that she observed almost whole the century, 20th century. And I asked, the world or humanity become better or same or worse? Without hesitation, she immediately responds, better. Reason she mentioned, when she was young, no concept of human right, no concept of right of self-determination. Now these things become universal. So therefore, now I think in the early part of 20th century, when nation declare war on their enemy, all the citizens, without question, they simply, proudly join military war effort. Now that, since Vietnam War, that changed now. I think desire for peace, I think everywhere. particularly among the younger generation. So I think, and then Berlin Wall, after Berlin Wall disappeared, big change happened. These not by force, but by popular movement. From Philippines up to Chile and some European countries, all these is a change. I think by popular movement, that's essentially, I think, by the strength of truth, force of truth, like that. So what do you think? Better or worse?
I haven't observed a century, but I don't know. I wonder about when you say it was a century, if as we get older, if we just observe more beauty in the world, or we learn how to find that, if when you live longer, you have to learn how to see these things. I don't know if you feel that way, if you've learned how to see beauty more, or, I mean, I'm sure the world is changing as well and social movements are picking up, but if you think that has to do with it?
Now, basically, you see, there is real hope. Human being, I believe, becoming more mature as a result of more difficulties. So now, affluent society. Previously, they, I think, 100% believe material value is the ultimate source of happiness. Now, sort of beginning, they also, even some my friend, I think a billionaire, very rich, but as a human being, very unhappy person. More anxiety, more stress, like that. So therefore, more and more people now really showing, I think really sort of begin to realize the ultimate source of happiness is within ourselves at a mental level. And even the healthy body also very much related with a healthy mind. This is mainly a number of scientists, through their research work, now they found the mental element is very, very important for individual happiness and, no question, happy family, happy community, like that. So I think this seems to see some change, some positive development. Itself not sufficient. Now we must work hard, and we have to make every effort. Past century becomes century of violence. Now this century should be century of peace. In order to develop peaceful century, that does not mean no longer any problem, any source of conflict. The source of conflict remain. Different interests always remain. And also divisions, religious-wise, and also national-wise. That's there. So every conflict or every sort of disagreement about or develop conflict, then we must solve these things through dialogue, meet face to face, with understanding, with sort of feeling, respect their right. They also human brothers, sisters. In ancient time, defeat your enemy is victory over yourself. Now modern time, not that. Destroy your enemy is actually destroy yourself. So whole world is part of yourself. So looks, appears, hand and legs, say something different, isn't it? But it's still part of one's own body. So something happened here, even some mosquito come here. Your hand have to go help. So 7 billion human beings are part of me, part of we. So thinking this, that's not just a religious sort of talking. The reality, we are a social animal. The southern world depend on, their future depend on northern world. Northern world, just a mission, produce mission, will not serve their stomach. So need the other people. In big cities or industries, worker, see, their food must come from farming side. The farming people also need some missions and some resources. Everything is dependent. I think in order to be happy family, each member of the family have the common responsibility to take care about family. So that
extended
and global level. Entire humanity are one human family member. That's true. Firstly, we are a social animal. Secondly, today's world, the global economy and the global warming, all these now compel us work together, live happily together. So we need effort. So I often used to telling 2 generations, generation of 20th century, that's my century, and you also. Then the century of
generation
of 21st century. You are generation of 21st century. The past cannot change. The future can change. So future change must start now. So that's your the opportunity and your responsibility. If you start effort with vision, with self-confidence, and determination, then within the end of this century can be a century of peaceful, century of, I think, a real human family. That I think possible. So that I always, my fundamental belief, and also I share whenever I have the opportunity to talk. So like that. So therefore, judging past 20th century's event, there is a sign of positive change. Now that take as a basis. Now further effort, this century can be better century. So you should not copy the 20th century's generation's thinking. Our mind more or less fixed. While we see some sort of drawbacks, but still we carry that
all the way.
All the way. So that is. So don't look the my generation's, let's say, behavior. You see, you should think, look, future, and must create better world, compassionate world. That's I really feel.
like to first say that I'm so honored to be here, and I just am so happy. And
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
When I was 10 years old, my only interest is play and a holiday.
I like those things too. So my question is.
I think, oh yes, your question.
No, go ahead.
Yes, okay.
Okay. I believe compassion is not compassion without action. It's just feeling sorry for someone. What advice do you have for the kids of the world to put their compassion into action?
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. See, I think best way to judge someone, whether compassionate or not, someone always talk compassion, doing nothing, is hypocrisy. Someone who really ready to help other people, particularly poorer section of people, or needy people, then we can say, oh, that person is really a compassionate person. Clear. So, compassion and also non-violence. You see, non-violence, just also avoid violence. It's not non-violence. Non-violence, circumstances such, oh, violence, ready to involve, but deliberately restrain violence. That's non-violence. So similarly, compassion, through action, helping, serving, or at least restrain, harming others, that is practice of compassion. Okay.
Wow. I was just dying to know that answer. Thank you so much. So
I would like to express these young human beings. You see, you still have very much alive this deeper human value. Mother's affection, and also when you surround with compassionate person, you feel happy. You yourself, when you play, you don't care what religious faith, what color, like that. Then gradually, grown up, then now this moment, you are really consider importance of human level. And human level, no differences what faith or non-believer or believer, what color, no differences. So long, showing smile, showing affection, then okay. Isn't it? Now, your age, 15, 20, then sometimes we losing the real sense of oneness of human being. With too much emphasis on secondary level of differences. Then my nation, my people, on the basis of color or faith or nationality. So please, you should not forget, while you've grown up, the basic human value must be alive. So we are talking with help of some scientists very seriously how to put in existing secular education field about this moral education. Our last few years in India and America and Canada, we really seriously talking or thinking. So that we really, I think, sometimes uneducated people are more honest. Educated people sometimes too much clever. So so is something wrong, something inadequate. Then now we are with help of many people. You see, we are working. So firstly, you yourself should realize this basic our value. So immediately, you remain as a good human being, compassionate human being. You find more your friend.
Friends.
And more friend, you get more gift. And particularly your birthday, you can then expect more gift.
Your Holiness, we ask young people from all over the world to send questions online. And one last question on their part that I would like to ask is, with so many distractions in this world, do you have any advice on how a young person can remain focused on what is truly important?
I think again education. In order to develop I think our brain fully, education, information is very important. So the sharpness of mind alone not adequate, but the empathy.
The focus and mindfulness is important.
So now focusing at a certain point does not mean 24 hours. No. While you are in class or some working, then you pay single-pointed attention. And then analyze. While you carry study, and your mind, your main mind, acquiring knowledge is mental consciousness. Namin Radhiri, Namin Rasmundo, this was sensory.
So one thing that we have to recognize is that when we are talking about applying our mind with a focus, we are talking at the level of mind, mental level, whereas many of the distractions...
Knowledge, education, mental work.
Mental level.
Mental level.
So when we talk about distractions generally arise as a consequence of chasing after the sensory experiences, sensory stimuli.
So then, I think firstly, they should know the sensorial sort of consciousness. In any way, there is limitation. And no ability to judge. Only sixth, mental mind. So knowledge,
at that level. So sensory perceptions have a certain limitation, whereas at the level of mind, where knowledge is cultivated, there is a real potential for enhancement and further increase.
Again, you see, that also, you see, I think depend to some extent, you see, the knowledge about different sort of consciousness sort of nature or different sort of ability. So
you do need some basic understanding of how the mind works, but that of course doesn't guarantee that you're going to be focused all the time.
You need, you see, a special sort of pay attention about a single-pointed sort of mental work. that also conviction, pros and cons sort of conviction. Then you deliberately make effort to increase single-pointed focusing, like that. Like that.
In the interest of time, Your Holiness, any message or advice for all the younger generation that is watching this live?
I think younger generation is the only sort of hope about future. So please think seriously and look world or look event from a wider perspective and long-sighted way. That's very important. Many problems due to short-sighted and small circles interest. So when we think oneness of 7 billion human beings, then naturally, so you can develop genuine sense of concern, of well-being of the whole world. Then many man-made conflict on the level of, on the too much emphasis on this secondary level of differences, then that reduce. If we consider the other so-called enemy, consider human brothers and sisters, then little bit of argument, okay, killing never happened. Because still consider your brothers, sisters. If you too much emphasis on secondary level, yes, then different color, different religious faith, or not believer, non-believer, and within same faith, belief, still educated people, uneducated people, and owner or employee, all so differences. There are too much sort of basis of differences. Then also, I think reality, interest for different sort of field is more or less, sometimes not much connected. So independence. So then extreme competitions, jealousy, extreme competition. Then these then creates frustration. Frustration creates, firstly, unhappiness, and secondly, then could develop violence. So, it's very, very important to think oneness of all human beings. That's, I feel, very important. It suits the basic reality. We are social animals. And in modern time, each individual nation's future depends on other. That's the reality. Then also, we just discussed about ecology. It's very important. The concern about ecology should be part of your daily life. That's very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much.